So one of the best things about getting to be the miss of a university, or even just winning a pageant, is the coming out ceremony, which is coronation. And if you're not familiar with that, with the HBCU culture and what coronations are, even like pageantry, it's almost like a wedding. It's supposed to be like the most exciting day of your life. And so the great thing about when I became the miss of my university was that I was one of the first in I want to say either 9 or 10 years to not be Greek. But more importantly, I had been so involved on campus, and I had been, at that time, I had been running orientation for some years, so I knew a lot of people, and I was a face that a lot of people knew. And so we actually, I believe, even to this day, we had the highest, one of the highest attended coronations. And we had, so mind you, we have several gymnasiums and auditoriums on our campus, and we had ours in the biggest gymnasium, and we packed it out. And so it was supposed to be the greatest day of my life. And so if you look back at pictures, you would see, there's a voiceover you have to do when I get to, be presented in this gown. I get to walk around, and, we do the tradition, the traditional wave. It's elbow, wrist, touch your pearls, blow a kiss. And so if you look at the pictures, you'll notice that, I was crying. And what's so interesting and so ironic is that only if you were an outsider looking, and I'm pretty sure if you had been in attendance, you would have thought they were tears of joy. But only a few know that those were actually tears of sorrow and tears of sadness. And if only I had known that was only the beginning of what should have been the beginning of the happiest time, was actually the beginning of one of the worst experiences I ever had. And I think that's something that, you are conditioned, and no one tells you that formally, but I think it's kind of an unspoken thing that, many a times, when you're in these positions, and for people who are on the outside looking in, it looks like, oh, that person has it made. But when you hear stories, and rest in peace to some of our recent tragedies that we've had with, the misses, for, with Chesley and some of the other, rest in peace to some of those other queens who, fell victim to suicide and tragedy, you learn that, everything that glitters isn't gold. And I think something that is really important, especially for that's important that our younger generation hears and sees more, is that there's a backside to every blessing. And you should be careful not to envy or be jealous of someone else's life, because you don't know what they're battling with and going through behind the scenes. And again, it's one of those things where, while I hate, and I won't say hate's a strong word, but when I was in the tragedy and in the chaos, it felt like the worst days of my life. But it taught me so many life lessons that I'm now able to share and impart with other people. But when I think back to that day, it was literally I remember being behind the stage and then putting makeup on my face, and she was like, Tania, you gotta stop crying. I can't, she had to keep reapplying the makeup because the tears would not stop coming. And that was because of just all of the chaos and the stress that went behind that day. I didn't even have the freedom of enjoying it. And so, at that time, I was definitely in my space, and I even ran my campaign. It was Nike, just to do it. And from the pageant until my entire platform was about being the non-traditional queen. You know, prior to me running, people knew that I was a sneakerhead. They knew that I was a tomboy. They knew, you know, that I didn't fit. You know, mind you, I had my hair shaved. I was wearing sneakers every day. Like I already, just on my platform, people knew that I was not the traditional, typical Miss. And so when I won, I didn't know it then, but to have young women tell me after, and to even see that after me, several misses were non-Greek as well. I didn't realize what that meant and what that stood for. And so that might have also played a part in why we had such high attendance. But again, one of the backsides to being the first and the only is not only that those who celebrate and champion it, but also those who reject it. And what at that time was so frustrating was that I was very clear about who I was and who I wasn't. That I was almost naive to think that it would just be welcomed and embraced immediately, and it wasn't. You know, when you're in those positions, they're very political, and they're treated, especially in the HBCU culture with tradition, they are treated very much so in tradition. And similar to being the president of the United States, your power, while to others it seems as if you have so much power and so much freedom, you really don't. And so at that time, even though I was the Miss and I was the face of the university, I had to essentially respect and be mindful of the opinions and the thoughts and the rules and regulations that were in place of our leadership at that time. And so mind you, it's an entire hierarchy there. And so this is not at all a dig at the leadership, because one of my mentors who is now deceased, but one of the women who inspired me to pursue leadership was Dr. Deborah Saunders White, who is no longer with us, but she was very, very awesome and very supportive. She actually wrote my letter of recommendation for me to attend an Ivy League graduate school, so she will always and forever be near and dear to my heart. And she was one of the few who supported me from day one and throughout my reign. However, in that particular hierarchy, I had to report to a vice chancellor at that time, and very traditional male. And him and I, from day one, we bumped heads. Because he had an idea of a very strict and very narrow idea of what a Miss should be, what she should look like, what she should do, what she should say, etc. And so there were many times where we would have meetings and check-ins, and I would present and give proposals, and if it didn't fall within the scope of what he thought it should be, it was rejected and vetoed. And we constantly bumped heads. And again, it taught me to be mindful of, like, you know, I didn't know it then as much as I know it now, or I knew it, but I didn't actually stand in it. But it's the idea that you get more with sugar than you get with ish. But I was just so determined to hold on to my identity as much as possible that I didn't realize how much of a challenge that would be. And because I did not have his support, it was a lot of him, a lot of restrictions that were placed on me. And so there were times where there were things that I wanted to do and things that I needed money and support for that I would be told no because I wasn't his favorite. And so in particular, when it came to coordination, everything that I initially had, I was initially very excited, and I had this entire thing planned out. And so one thing in particular, I remember, this is way back when Lupita wore this pretty, mind you, I'm actually wearing blue on my nails, but she had wore this really pretty pale blue dress to an awards show, and it was so amazing that it inspired me. Like, while I know the traditional wear is white, I wanted to purchase a dress that was still blue. It was blue, but it was light enough that it appeared white, depending on how you looked at it. But essentially, the dress that I wanted to wear in my coming out ceremony, I didn't want it to look like that traditional puffy white dress that most of the time the queens were wearing. And so I remember I had presented this idea, and they told me no, that I needed to wear the dress that was similar to what folks had worn prior. Remind you, I had seen other queens, and I had been a part of other, or more on the back end, but I had been a part of other queens during their reign, and they had the freedom to choose their own dress. But I was under a different and a new leadership who was not going for it. And so I remember they denied me the right to buy a dress, so I had to rent a dress, which is unfortunate because usually the queen gets to keep hers. She gets to purchase a dress and her crown and all those things, and she gets to keep it. I did not get to pick out my own crown. I did not get to pick out my own dress, and it was rented, so I had to return it afterwards. And it was just the entire ceremony. I won't say the entire ceremony because some parts of it I did arrange and then I did have a chance in planning, but it felt like they wanted me to present a version of myself that wasn't me. And it wasn't just in that ceremony, it was throughout my reign. It was constantly being picked on about my hair choices and my outfits. And it was just like little by little, I was constantly being asked to change parts about me and things about myself, even though I was very clear that this was the platform that I was running on and that I wanted to show and to show others that it was okay to be yourself in these positions. I felt like it was important for other women, especially women who were younger than me at the time. So I was a upperclassman. I wanted the young women to know that, hey, you can be in this role and not have to look like everybody else. Because most of the time when you look at the pageants, whether it's on a local or a national or international scale, until recent years, they all looked exactly alike. And I didn't want women to feel like they had to be or to have a certain look. Mind you, I was also struggling with my weight at that time, and so there was constant pressure to lose weight so that I could fit into things and not be plus size, and they made me wear certain things. It was just a lot. I was always in Spanx, and it was so frustrating because I was trying to hold on to me, and I just couldn't. And so I was experiencing so much pressure on one side, but it was great because I was also able to push the envelope and also break so many barriers. I advocated for the Mr. and the Miss and even student leadership to have more perks and more benefits and more support. And so it was great even after my reign to see some of the younger kings and queens and leadership being able to enjoy the benefits that I fought so hard for. But it was sucky to know that they didn't even realize the pressure and what it took to get them, and that I could not enjoy them myself. I think what made it even worse is that up until that point, this was the institution. If you've heard anything about my story, this was the reason why I chose my university out of all the other universities, and why I was so connected to it was because I thought I had finally found my home. As somebody who moved around a lot and never really felt connected 100% to a place, even like in Philly, I don't always feel connected 100% to any place because I was always bouncing around. I didn't have that. I used to envy, the people who lived in one neighborhood and they lived there their entire lives. And so they knew everybody. I didn't have that because I was always moving. And so it's like I knew everybody here and there. I never felt I had a home. And so when I got to my university, I gave it so much because I thought I finally got to the place where these people knew me, they loved me, and it was home. I had started organizations. I brought them dances, and mind you, dances that I still see in TikToks and videos that they still do to this day, almost 10 years later. And I just knew that when I got to this position that I would finally get the recognition and the love that I was working so hard for. And so you can imagine, not only was I experiencing opposition on the other side, on one side, I started to really get it the most on the student side, and that, don't get me wrong, there were so many people who were championing me and supporting me and loving me, but sometimes the criticism can be so loud that it drowns out all of the good. And maybe it's just, and I think I'm learning too, I've learned now in an age that it's important to silence the noise, right? And to not allow the mess, to cloud, to clog the message. But at that time, I was young and still figuring out who I was, and it was not that easy. And it definitely wasn't something that I knew how to do. And so I remember just like having to constantly hear just things that people said about me. And it was things they put on Twitter and social media, and rumors. And it was just like, I think her most hurtful part is that I didn't understand where it was coming from or why. It would be from people who I never even talked to, who were calling me names and talking about my weight. It would be the men. These are men who athletes who's I was front row at their games and supporting them, and I would give people discounts. I would help people with their homework, let them cheat off my papers. I had done so much for so many people that it was so surprising when I felt like, as soon as I got in this position, that I became like public enemy number one. I would have, everyone just had an opinion and what they thought I should be wearing, what they thought I should be doing, what they thought I should be talking like. And I was like, what? And then I would get crap for not doing more when they didn't realize that I was fighting so many systemic and systematic things behind the scenes to make those things happen, or how things that I thought I could realistically, that I thought I would have the power to do, that I really had no power to do. And before long, it started to have a toll. It took a big toll on me. It was in college that I was diagnosed with alopecia, and that was hair loss. And so I had my hair, and even to this day, there's even though I've gotten treatment since then, there are still some bald spots that I have in my hair that are never going to go away. So also one of the reasons why I had to shave my head. But prior to me doing that, I used to wear wigs, and people would make some of the most hateful and mean comments about my hair, not knowing that underneath those wigs, my hair was falling out from stress. My weight was going up and down, and I would get bigger and I would get smaller, I would get bigger, and I would get smaller, and it was the constant stuff, and it was driving me crazy. I even contemplated suicide at one point. And then I was always so sad. I didn't know who to talk to, because it seemed like I had nobody to talk to. And I had friends who I now know, and even then I realized weren't really friends. They were more like frenemies. I would have people who were only my friends because of clout, or they would become my friend to get information. And when I would share things with them, they would twist it around and then make me the topic of conversation in their other friend groups. And before long, I didn't know who to trust and who to confide in. And so I turned to addictive behaviors and excessive eating and just overworking myself. I was in the hospital so many times. It was just so much stuff, mind you, on top of me having to deal with things that were happening in my personal life. So dealing with abuse, my family, we lost our house when I was in college. And so I had to move home. And there's nothing like having to move home. And my mom was like, she had to downsize. And so she had to move into an apartment, which meant that she couldn't take any of my things. People didn't even know, I'd never had my own room until I was 17. And even then I had only been in North Carolina for a year and a half before I had to go to college and have a roommate. And so the room that I had finally gotten, I had to go and pack up all of my stuff and bring it back to campus. And so I had to move off campus because my roommates came in and they were like, Tania, why is your entire life here? And they didn't know that I had no place to put it. This school had really become my home. And the place that I thought I was at home treated me like I was an outsider. And it just, eventually that sadness became bitterness and resentment. And then that went to anger and just pure hatred, that literally before I even got to the end of my reign, I was over them. I stopped trying to fight. I stopped trying to do. People would ask me to do things. It was no. I was rejecting everything and everyone because I was like, what's the point? What was the point? You're going to talk about me anyway. You're going to hate me anyway. You don't care about me. And I was just so mad. And it was even after my reign, mind you, I was so consumed. It was my 4th year. I was a senior. I had been so consumed and so beaten down from being in an abusive relationship and dealing with all these pressures that I hadn't even considered life after college. To the point where I got closer to graduation, I was about to student teach, and I realized that, oh my gosh, this isn't even what I want to do. And I wasn't where I thought I should be at that time. And so I ended up staying another year, and people gave me a hard time about that because I was the miss who couldn't couldn't graduate with her class. So I missed out on getting to be on the stage because they wouldn't let me be on the stage at graduation because I decided to stay back another year. And so I missed out on all these things. And again, that same person in leadership didn't like me. And so he didn't even let me crown the next queen, who happened to be one of my mentees to this day. Shout out to you, Courtney. I love you to death. But I didn't get to crown her or Daisy, Daisy was another queen after me, and she was the one who was doing my makeup. These are all young women, and all the queens after me were young women who were a part of my college journey, and who I knew they wanted to be there, and I wanted to support them, but I was not in a mental and emotional space to support them, but also I was denied certain opportunities because I was labeled difficult and angry and just like the no queen. And it was just so unfortunate. And then I did something that in the moment, and again, we talk about it all the time of hurting people, and I own it. But in that moment, and when I was doing it, I thought it was okay, but it wasn't. And that was, I stole something that was a traditional token for Miss NCCU, and that was the cape. This is a cape, and I still have it to this day. This is a cape that they throw over the Miss right before they crowned her. And this is a cape that it gets passed down from queen to queen. And I was the last, even to this day, I was the last Miss to wear it. They had another one, but it wasn't as cute or as sexy as this one. And I remember I was cleaning out my office and I was cleaning out my room when it was time to move out, and I was in the process of returning their stuff and cleaning out my stuff. And I remember I came across this cape, and I just had all these flashbacks of not getting to keep my dress, and the fact that I had no tokens, nothing that I could have that said that I was here, because of just all the drama that came behind it. And so I stole this. And in my own way, I felt like I was protesting against all of the crap that I had been through. And I took this. And I remember even people who knew me years after, I had people call me and ask me about this cape. And I lied. And I told them that I didn't have it because I refused to give it up. Because it was my way of saying F y'all. Because y'all didn't love me. Y'all didn't appreciate me when I was there. And I knew that I wasn't the only one who went through that. And I was just tired, and I took this, and it wasn't okay. And I'm okay, and I am adult enough, and I have grown enough, and I have healed enough to know, number one, that no, I don't care what it is, but no amount of hurt justifies hurting someone else. And I know that this may or may not have changed the coronation experience for queens after me. And I had no right to do that to them. I think I always felt guilty. I think probably why I overcompensated with them and I tried to support them in other areas and with money and other things, because I felt guilty about not giving this to them. But either way, I am never too big to say I'm sorry. And I can say on a public platform that this was not okay, and that I was wrong for taking it. And the first opportunity I get to return it, I'm going to. Because I don't need anything physical to say that I was here. I know that I was there because I'm still seeing the legacy that I left there. And it's not in a physical thing, but also no matter what happened in my experience, I'm also getting to see it in the freedoms that and the benefits that the royal court has now that they didn't have when I was coming in. And I am so sorry, because no amount of hurt justifies you hurting anybody else. And no amount of hate should make you want to hate. And I don't. People have said a lot of things about me, and to this day they still will. And I've learned that no matter who you are and what you do, somebody somewhere is going to always have something to say. But it's not about what people say. It's about what, number one, what you respond to, and then number two, what you believe about yourself. And I have this saying now, and one of our principles is that, no one talks to myself more than I So talk to me nice. And if you get it, it has that me, myself, and I little thing in there. But it's this idea of, doesn't matter what people say. It's about what you say and believe about yourself. And then I didn't know who I was. And so I allowed who everybody else said I was determine who I was. And now I know in age and now in experience is that doesn't matter what anybody says, what I say to me. And my voice wasn't that loud then, but it's blaring and she's loud now. And no matter what people say, I know who I am. I know who I was then, I know who I am now. And I am in some ways the same girl with a big heart who wants nothing more than to find home, which I've learned how to make wherever I am, because home is where the heart is, and my heart is full of love. And I will never allow what people say and what people do to me to change that. Because at the end of the day, and it's crazy because sometimes the things that I hear, even to this day, the things that I hear people say about me, most of the time the hate comes from people who claim to be Christians, right? I think one of the reasons why, not saying that I reject Christianity, because I don't, but why I reject this idea of religion, because when it boils down to it, and when you look at what it means to be Christ-like and what it means to love God, it is to love. God said above all, above anything, love me, love yourself, and love others to the highest extent. And so I don't care what anybody says about anything. No amount of, we don't judge and we don't hate. You spread love, and if you don't know how to spread love, then don't say anything. But I've also learned that people can't love others until they love themselves. And so many a times when people are talking and they're saying things to you, they ain't really talking to you or about you. It has everything to do with how they feel and what they think about themselves. And that is a personal problem. And so I wish I could say that, I am 110% cured, and that's not true, because sometimes, and even to this day, words still hurt, and they still hurt me. But I've learned that they're less about me and more about others, but that I get to choose what I believe about me. But more importantly, it's important that I am talking to me twice as much as others are. And so I have embraced, and I always, I told somebody the other day, I was like, people think that you're crazy when you talk to yourself. I believe that you are crazy if you don't talk to yourself. Because either you're letting the words of other people drive you crazy, or you're not as in tune with yourself as you need to be. At the end of the day, I am my own best friend, just like you are your own best friend. And being your own best friend means that you have to remind yourself who you are. That's no one else's job. That is a personal job, a personal thing for you. And that comes, and that's me talking to myself. Number one is that I'm able to tell myself when I'm wrong, right? And that this was wrong. And I'm friends enough with myself to go, sis, that's not how we do things. But then also I'm able to talk to myself, and when I'm in my low moments, I'm able to pick myself back up, right? And in the moments where I need to feel love, and I need to feel beautiful, and I need to love myself, because I've had to learn how to love myself in all of my changes. I turned my alopecia into a hairstyle, child. I turned my weight into a lifestyle, child. That rhyme. And now, more importantly, like, I'm able to live and to bask in that. And so it's interesting enough, because people are always like, oh, Tania, you look so good now. And it's like, yes, a lot of things that have changed about me physically, but they have everything to do with who I am internally and all the work that I did internally, because what you see on the outside has everything to do with the inside. And that came from how I talk to myself and making sure that my voice and what I'm saying, number one, is positive, but number two, that it's louder than all the other voices and all the other noise that comes from the outside. And so from the bottom of my heart to my institution, the sloping hills and verdant green of North Carolina Central University, I am sorry to anybody who I hurt. And I won't say I'm sorry, I'm learning to say I apologize, because I'm not sorry. But I apologize. And to anyone who I hurt while I was hurting, I apologize. And to anyone who I do take being an example and a representation very seriously. And so if any capacity, in any way, if I use my platform to hurt anyone or to lead anyone astray, I apologize. But also I hope that you are inspired less by the glitz and the glam and more by the truth. And in service that I gave then and that I continue to do to this day. And I do hope that I can return home once again in the near future, but more importantly that I put this back in its rightful place. And hopefully I am received when I do. And if not, I've learned to forgive myself. But more importantly, I know that the person who is the forgiver of all forgiver does. And that's all that matters to me. P.S. I just wanted to add that that same vice chancellor who gave me a hard time and told everybody that I was difficult and angry and mean, fast forward to, I want to say about 2 years later, he ended up being fired and under investigation for a really big scandal. Okay, so I mean what I say when I say that my God and my daddy don't play about me, child. You watch what you do to me. And it's not laughing at anybody's demise, but it's also a reminder that when people do you dirty, even when you don't see it, everything that is all about karma, it come back. And it come back strong, child, strong. And so when they do you wrong, you just wait and you see. He's got you.